So continuously, he kept looking for family and what he thought a family should be. And he came ever so close. Ever so close. When he married one Anna Morris, his esposita, his little wife. And I remember the first time. And gentlemen, I know there's been times that women have absolutely scared you to death. And this is exactly what happened when I first met Anna. Now you've got to imagine, I was at Daniel Harvey Hill's house. And Daniel was married to Anna's sister. And I'm in a room, now you got to imagine, it was very cold, fireplace going. Miss Anna comes into the room. And I'm trying to talk to her. My palms of my hands were so sweaty. And I was so nervous trying to make conversation with this lady. And as time went by, she lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I lived in Lexington. This is, of course, I was working as a teacher at BMI. And, you know, I just could not get this lady out of my mind. So what do? Charlotte, North Carolina. I just pop up on the doorstep. So I'm going to see if Miss Anna would end up marrying me. And quite naturally, we ended up getting married. Okay? Our honeymoon, we went all the way up into New York. And we spent our time at Niagara Falls. You know, we vacationed there. And as, of course, after the honeymoon, we go back to Lexington. Now, there was a little deal that she always did. She would sit at her dressing table, okay? And of course, I would come in and she had this long, raven black hair and it hung all the way to the ceiling. And I would go in and I would sit down on the bench beside her and I would sit there and I would stroke that hair and I would kind of caress her face. Now, ladies and gentlemen, of course you all know that Stonewall was over this Stonewall Brigade during the war. But, you know, nobody ever got to see the more gentle side of Thomas Jackson. Of course, I never did like that name Stonewall, you know, but it kind of got stuck on me and I had to endure it for the rest of my life. But Miss Anna, she always brought out that side that most people would never see. And of course, in the war, we get to the time that we spent Christmas at Corbin's Hall. And of course, in November of '62, I had this beautiful little baby girl born. And I named her Julia after my mother. And this was probably the best Christmas that I was going to have. Even though I was away from my wife and my baby, I still had these thoughts of being at home and being part of the family. And little Jamie Corbin, 5 years old. She just stole this old general car. And that brought out a side of me that most people would never see. Me and this little child. Of course, I'm thinking about my own at home, you know, less than a month old. And what it would be like to be back home at Christmas with my wife and my child. But that was one of the most special times of Portage Hollow at that time. And I remember her bringing me those cookies and biscuits from the big house and bring me a cup of chamomile tea to drink with it. But at the big house, at Christmas time, there was General Lee and me and some other staff officers. And little Janie, she asked me if her father would ever come home. And at this time, I told her, I said, I pray that all the fathers come home. Because we all needed one more Christmas together. That's what we were wanting, to be a family and be together at Christmas. And you know, when springtime came, and I had to leave Corbin's Hall, little Janie, she had started fever. And I left Dr. McGuire to be with little Janie. And I went in to see Janie, and I told her, I said, I hope that my little friend gets better. But little Janie, she would not never have another Christmas. They came and told me that she passed away. And I got up and walked away from my men and sit by myself and I cried. And they asked, why is he crying so over one little girl when he's never shed a tear with his men? And the reply was, he's not only crying for this little child, but for every man that he's lost. For all those men that would never have another Christmas with their family. And this little girl that would never have another Christmas. So the most important thing in Stonewall Jackson's life, or any man's life, or any woman's life, is family at Christmas time. Thank you.
That's my list.
Oh, you did? It's good. Frank, little brother, you get? We got several over here.
Now it's my extreme pleasure to introduce what has become known as my younger back up. I want to tell you something about this young man before I bring him on. Growing up in Laurel Hill, we often had a lot of times to get out in the 1,500 acres we had to enjoy the creeks and the streams and play, and we weren't doing our hard chores every day. But there's one particular story I always like to tell about him, and he hears me tell it all the time, and that's him in the hornet's nest. And there was a day down by the river, and this will explain to you why he was such a tenacious cavalryman in years to come. But we were out playing down by the Ararat River, and as we were playing, we came upon this tree that had a huge hornet's nest in it. And James looked up there and he said, let's knock that down. And I looked at him and said, brother, I don't think that's something we really want to do. But he kept on and he kept on and he kept on, and I could tell that wasn't going to deter him at all. So he started climbing up the tree and he started poking at that old nest, and the hornets started flying everywhere, and I got enough sense to know when to get out of the way. Well, I can't say he didn't have enough sense to get out of the way, but he kept poking that old nest. And the more they flew around, the more he poked it. Well, I have to admit, my younger brother won out. Finally got the hornet's nest he wanted, and not without getting stung a few times. And not without getting back home and getting her hide panned a little bit by Mama when she saw what was going on. But that's the kind of brother that I have. That's the kind of man that eventually grew up to be the great general of the Confederacy. One of the three of the finest men of faith and Christians that we've had in the Southern Army. At this time, I'd like for you to welcome Major General James Brown Stuart. Yeah.
He likes to tell that story. I mean, I don't mind hearing it either. I like reminiscing with my brother, and when it comes to Christmas, reminiscing is one of the best things to do, is sit around with family and be with family. As General Jackson said, that's one of the best moments of the year, is just to be able to spend time with one another. And he was talking about his wife. I can't discuss anything without talking about my own beautiful wife, Miss Flora. I didn't go to Charlotte to get her. I met her. She was actually at a fort that I was stationed at in the late 1850s. I'd just gotten out of West Point. I was transferred out west to fight the Indians, and we were standing out at the entrance of the fort, and there comes Miss Flora riding on this beautiful horse. She was just a magnificent person. And all of a sudden that horse turned around, started running away, galloping away. I jumped on a horse, chased after it, and caught up to it and brought her back to safety. At least that's how I had it in my mind I was going to do it. But she was such a great horsewoman that I didn't even have to, that thought never even came true. Possibly better than I was. Me and Miss Flora got married, had 3 children, but I want to tell you about the Christmas time, late 1862, of this horrible Civil War. Our oldest, we named her Flora after her mother, had passed away. All we had was little Jimmy. Now Jimmy's name was not Jimmy to start with. When we had Jimmy, we named him Philip St. George Cook Stuart, named after his grandfather. But once his grandfather decided to join the United States Army, stay with the United States Army instead of joining with the Confederacy, I was not going to let my son have the name of a traitor, and I changed his name to James Ewell Brown Stuart Jr. So we named him back, named him Jimmy. But little Miss Flora passed away in late 1862. That was a hard time for me, especially in that November, late November, right about the time the Battle of Fredericksburg is going to take place. I actually got some relief from the pain that I was feeling losing Miss Flora. Me and my good assistant, Harold von Borken. He was a Prussian. He was 6'4", about 250 pounds. He was a massive man. I kind of like having oddities around my camp. I had Corporal Hagen, who was also upper 6'4", 6'5", weighed about 250, 300 pounds. I also had a raccoon that we chained to an artillery piece, and that raccoon would attack anybody that tried to come near that artillery piece. I had banjo players. I had a whole crew of people with me. And so me and Borka, we called him Vaughn for short, we were sitting up on top of this little cabin, and we were watching these 2 divisions of General Longstreet's, General McLaws and General Hood's divisions were down below us. And all of a sudden, we started hearing a racket start. Those men were lining up in battle line, fixing snowballs, and throwing them at one another. They were having a battle right there in the middle of the field. Just having a good old time. It's getting near Christmas time. They're wanting to go home. They want to have some kind of way to break out and break free from the tumultuous life of a Civil War soldier. And so they started having a snowball fight. Well, me and Vaughn, we had a blast watching them fight out these large battles, line up in battle line, trying to outflank one another. But then they noticed that the general was watching them. And they turned their rifles or their snowballs on me and Vaughn, and we had to skedaddle off that house before we got knocked off the house by all those snowballs. Battle of Fredericksburg happens. It's one of the worst slaughters the Union Army has ever faced. And we were talking about it earlier. The battle happens on December 13th. There is a swell in front of the Confederate line. There's thousands of Union soldiers that are in that swell in front of that stone wall at Fredericksburg. They're pinned down. They can't leave, many of them. They finally get orders to fall back. It's at nighttime. Maybe they can make it out. They refuse to leave, and when me, General Jackson, and me and General Lee looked out onto the battlefield, the Northern Lights came out. And it gave, when those Union soldiers were ordered to leave, they said they're not going to leave without burying their dead. But they couldn't do it they were going to try to do it by candlelight. But the Aurora Borealis occurred. The Northern Lights opened up the sky, and they were able to bury their dead before they left the field. It was the most beautiful sight, most humbling part of that battle was seeing the Union soldiers burying their dead by the lights of the Northern Lights. Their own North had opened up the heavens and allowed them to bury their own dead. After the Battle of Fredericksburg, General Jackson was discussing, we stay at this very fancy home, except I had to stay in a tent. General Jackson got better quarters than I did, unfortunately, myself. But Miss Flora, after losing our daughter, she came and visited me. At Christmas time, on Christmas Day, we got to spend a little time with one another. And it was so good to see her. She had to stay away. I was always constantly on the move. I'm the eyes and ears of General Robert E. Lee's army. I can make sure where the enemy troops are, where General Lee's troops are, and make sure I can tell them immediately when the Union Army is approaching. The day we have a little get-together, a little ball. Me and Miss Flora dance the night away, but at midnight I leave for my Christmas raid. My men did not even know that we were going on a raid until about an hour before we left. We take off and we ride up behind the Union Army. They are against the Rappahannock River right at Fredericksburg. I take my cavalry up north above them, cut off supply lines from them, but I'm finding that I'm getting not much supplies. I'm getting a few wagons, a few horses, but nothing's really materializing. And as my brother was saying, I'm always a tenacious person when it comes to fighting. I need a large loot, and I need to have something to show for my raid. And so when I went out and I couldn't get much, I went further north because I knew that the Union Army was getting fed their supplies by boat for a certain length, and then it was going by land the rest of the way. So I went up and I found it. I found about 200 horses, captured about 200 men, and I even sent a message to the Union Adjutant General Quartermaster General for the Union Army, Montgomery Meigs. I sent him a message and told him, I'm sending another general from another side a message by telegraph. I told him, I said, I'm ashamed at the state of the mules that the Union Army has. They just cannot pull all the wagons I have captured from the Union Army. I sent that to the Quartermaster General of the Union Army, Montgomery Meigs. That was my Christmas raid. Came back to General Robert E. Lee, handed over about 200 horses, 200 prisoners, sent the prisoners down. The officers went to Libby Prison in Richmond. The others went down towards Andersonville Prison down to Georgia and spread out all over the South. That was my Christmas. Christmas Day with my wonderful wife. Christmas night, I went on a raid. very successful raid. I arrived on January 1st, first day of the year, 1863, back at home. Now, we've had, Vaughn is a wonderful character. He was wounded not too long ago, got shot in the neck. We thought we had lost him, but he was one of the few people that really makes war fun, because when we're not fighting, he's always looking for something to do. And we were actually camped out at a plantation up in Northern Virginia, and we had not much to do, and so Vaughn and another gentleman decided they're going to put on a show for one another, for all the group. We go into the big plantation house, they spread up a blanket across the hallway, and they put a candle behind that, and so all you see is their shadows, and they're going to put on a little play for us. And the first trick they do is Vaughn gets this big oversized coat, and he runs around the house and starts putting all kinds of different things inside of that coat. And then he lays down on a table, and the doctor, the other gentleman that's with him, reaches in, because all you can see is the shadow, will reach in, grab out, and he pulls out a pair of antlers. He throws that down, and grabs up pots and pans. He's pulling out paintings. Well, that's what's ailing you, sir. We had that little skit. And then the last skit was they were going to do the can-can. Vaughn dressed up as a woman, had the dress on and everything, and they start kicking up their heels. And I told him afterwards, I said, the only time I could realize you make such a good woman that the only time I realized it was you is when you lifted up your skirt and I saw those big Prussian boots. But Vaughn is a wonderful character. I'm so glad he actually survived, but someone that did survive was John Pelham. He was one of my best artillery officers, a young man from Alabama. John Pelham single-handedly held off the Union Army for about an hour and a half with one cannon at the Battle of Fredericksburg. That young man dies at a fight near Kelly's Ford, not too far away from Fredericksburg. And when me and Flora had little Miss Flora pass away, I told her, I said, no matter what, the next child's name is going to be named Pelham. And we had a girl, we named her Virginia Pelham Stuart. But the winter of 1862, again, probably the hardest winter for us simply because we lost little Miss Flora. Now the next winter, didn't get to spend as much time with my wife as I'd like to have, but I did get to spend time with my brother that you just met. My brother brought his son, my nephew, to Richmond, and I was trying to find me and Miss Flora a house. I had been in the Army since I got out of West Point. We lived on barracks. We had really no actual home, and so I had to raise up enough money, saved up enough. I had invested in some land out in Missouri. I had got money from that, and I was trying to find a house. And Alec was helping me finance that, work out that deal. We were in Richmond. His son, my nephew, was with us, and I pulled my nephew away from his father, and I took him down the street and took him to a candy shop. Took him there and gave him as much sweets as he could eat, and then put up as many as he could hold in one bag, and we took it with him. It was a wonderful time. That was a good December I spent with my brother Alec. But after that, that's probably one of the toughest years as far as for the Confederacy that we saw. December 1863 rolls around, and we have suffered defeats at Gettysburg, Vicksburg, Chattanooga. We won Chickamauga, but Chattanooga was captured, the Battle Railroad hub. My troops were sorely out without ammunition, without good weaponry, and what we did have didn't work that well. We're going up towards Northern Virginia, where General Grant has finally started his overland campaign against General Robert E. Lee, and I'm scouting positions, making sure that where the Union Army is coming at, making sure that Robert E. Lee is informed of wherever the enemy might strike him. And last report I heard was that General Sheridan is on the move, and he's moving towards Richmond. And so I'm heading off to Yellow Tavern in order to stop General Sheridan. Thank you all very much.